Every day we're reading more news about people coming into trouble, coming into problems with the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, my partner, Justin Paperny, has tremendous advice. Justin, today you spoke with me about somebody who reached out to you. Tell us the story.
So a lot of people going through this system, it's a tough time, in part because they never imagined they'd be involved in the system. Once they were involved, at worst case, they'd hoped that it would be handled civilly, and just like that, they're facing a federal sentencing hearing. And in some cases, like Jim, whom we'll discuss, he was told worst case, probation, maybe 6 months home confinement for a tax crime. At sentencing, he was hit with a 30-month sentence, devastated. A few days ago, got his designation to federal prison. His lawyer gave him some advice that he wanted to discuss with us. And specifically, that advice involved some advice that he got from someone who had previously been to prison. It was this lawyer's client from many years ago. And on this call, Jim told me that this prisoner said to him, really, the best and easiest way to serve your sentence is just to disconnect and disassociate yourself from the outside world. They're going to live their life. You're going to live your life. That's the best way to serve time. And Jim wanted to know, is that accurate? Is that true? Should I forget about my family and friends while I serve my 30-month sentence for tax fraud? And I thought it would be a good idea to have this conversation with you, considering you served a very long time in prison.
Yeah, sadly, a lot of people get that same guidance. In fact, it didn't matter what prison security level exists. There's always going to be a group of people that are giving advice. And one of the recommendations that I would suggest that anybody listens to who is in prison is the person who's giving them that advice, just kind of ask, how did that work out for you? Because most of the time it's people that have gone into prison and come out of prison and gone back into prison and gone back out of prison, and they're teaching people how to live in prison. But of course, that's not the recipe for success. How did you advise this young man that reached out to you?
So he's watched a lot of our work, and he asked about you, and he was a little embarrassed or even a little apologetic that he may be complaining about serving a measly 30 months, which is a very long time relative to how long you have served or other people on our team or other clients. So I shared some of the lessons that you had learned or shared with me, because he found it unfathomable to serve 30 months in federal prison. It seemed like an eternity. So what advice would you offer for Jim or anyone going through this experience, whether it's 3 months, 30 months, or 15 years? Because it does seem like an eternity when you hear that number.
I think you're right. I think that it doesn't matter if it's 3 months or 3 weeks or 3 days. Anytime you're separated from the people you love and the people who love you, it's devastating and it's hard. In many cases, for me, it was easier to be serving multiple decades in prison because I knew that I had done something wrong. I knew, and forgive me, you keep seeing me look down here, it's because I'm recording the audio, but that's the way you do it when you come out of prison. You're just trying to figure out and learn, and that's what we're doing today. But to stay focused on the story, I will say many people who are serving time in federal prison get that same message. And it's hard, and I remember walking around the track with people that were serving relatively short sentences. And I say relative, I mean that, because in prison you're going to meet people that have been in there for 10 years or 15 years. Not as many that have done more than 20 years, but that's still a long time. And when you're in prison for a long time, you learn to live in prison. For me, I knew that I made really bad decisions that put me in prison. For somebody like Jim, if he's reaching out to you, it's very likely that he's serving time for a white-collar crime that very easily could have been resolved in the civil courts. Very easily could have been resolved with a deferred prosecution agreement or even a non-prosecution agreement. And there are many layers that influence that. But influencing that mitigation strategy, Justin, as you and I have discussed many times and many people on our team have discussed, has many stages. And if you focus on living in prison, it's kind of like, I'm trying to be strong, okay? I'm trying to get ready for a successful life, but I'm doing so with both of my legs shackled and one arm tied behind my back if I'm right-handed. The only thing I got is my left hand, because the only thing I'm doing is I'm trying to live in prison, because that's what people are telling me how to do it. But if I want to use all of my critical thinking skills, all of my intellectual capacity, I need to free up all of my resources. And those resources, for the most part, are outside of prison walls. So yeah, I would give just the opposite advice. Anybody who's telling a person to forget about the world outside and focus on time inside is effectively setting themselves up for a pathway to failure and struggle and difficulty, as we hear about every single day.
Something that is important that was conveyed to Jim is being very particular about who was actually giving you advice. That experience might have worked for that person, because that former prisoner, who ironically also served time for a tax case, also told him something that's true. There's very little violence in these minimum security camps. I thought that was honest advice. But he also said, you're going to be bored all day, all night. And I said, our clients, our team had measurably different experiences. Why did he tell you that it was boring? And I think it was in part by disconnecting from the outside world. So he wasn't connected with family. He didn't want visits. And it was a lot of TV and table games. So can you talk a little bit about ways that our team or our clients or you overcame the inevitable boredom that can be pervasive inside of these camps? Because I want Jim to be excited when he goes in, to see the possibilities that can exist through confinement and then what's possible on the other side. So boredom is what he heard 150 times when he was on the call with this person his lawyer connected him to.
I think every individual is different because we're all in a different stage. Some people go into prison and they've got their financial security in order. They're not worried about coming home and creating a financial, making money again. More people, many more people have been, shellacked by the federal government, and their finances have been obliterated. And those people should have a different strategy than the person who is financially successful. The key, in my view, is to really define success given where you are at a given stage. In the case of a guy that went in today that reached out to us, and great guy, Mark, poor fella, CPA, finance guy, went into prison with a mindset of what was going to happen. He got there and he found a different story. He wasn't going to be eligible for the RDAP program, which he kind of had his heart set on. But one of the good things that Mark had is he said, at the end of the day, this is not a bad prison. And he found himself the right job, and he's working with puppies, and he's talking with his girl, and he's setting up for success as he can define success given the strategy, the situation of his life. He doesn't need to worry about making money, okay? So it's great to spend his time focusing on puppies and just saying, let me just get through this 14 months that I'm going to be here and know that I'm going to go home. In that case, he'll set up one kind of strategy. But if it's another guy that goes in there and he says, I don't have really my mindset mapped out yet with what I'm going to do with my life, he's got to realize there are multiple stages to mitigation. And that mitigation could begin at the very earliest time when he's dealing with prosecutors and proffer sessions and trying to get the right charge. It could be when he's going to the PSR, he's got to have a mitigation strategy. It could be him thinking about the case managers that are going to have influence and discretion on what he does. It could be the people he meets on the other side of the journey. There's just so many layers that the person has to do the same thing that he did to become successful in any other area of life. Actually, you can tell it. What are those stages that we talk about?
With respect to stages of the federal prison term?
With respect to how do you define success? How do you get through something?
So I could relate to Jim because I was given similar advice upon my surrender. And I began asking better questions. I met you and others, and you encouraged me to observe. As you mentioned earlier in the video, observe how that strategy is working out for some, and observe how it's working out for me and others who are going down a different path. Then make your own decision, and as you like to say, own it. And don't blame anybody but yourself. I think that Jim didn't fully understand how you could even communicate or grow your network from prison. And he presumed that because you don't have access to internet, of course some guys do illegally through iPhones, I think he presumed because you don't have access to the internet and visitation may be off right now or very limited, that in many ways there is nothing that you can do. So can you go through some of the ways that you were able to grow your network while in custody, maintain relationships, What were some of those specific things? Because I know you did it, I'll give away one of them, before email even existed for a long time. And I ask you because once Jim learned, he was very encouraged and he wasn't as scared about going to the inside, not as scared about shutting out his family. He wants to engage. So what were some of these specific ways?
Well, you spoke with Jim. Let me ask you a question about Jim.
Sure.
What did Jim do for a living?
He was an accountant.
Okay, so it's very likely he has an advanced credential, an advanced degree, and that didn't happen by accident.
Right.
It began very likely with him defining success. He understood, I want to be an accountant. And he understood, in order for me to be an accountant, I have got to define, that's the goal. Then he's got to create a strategy, and that strategy is documented. He knows he's got to get an undergraduate degree. He knows he's got to get into perhaps a good graduate school. He knows he's got to pass the CPA exam. He knows he's got to get some training with auditing and then with forensic accounting and then, whatever the intricacies are of the accounting profession. But these are gradual stages. They're all documented. And then he's got to create his tools, his tactics, and his resources. He's got to get the good grades. That's a resource. He's got to build a resume. That's a resource. He's got to serve an internship. That's a resource. All of these are the principal path to success in any area. It's no different in federal prison. I've got to start by defining success. What is it I'm trying to accomplish? Am I trying to get out at the soonest possible time? Well, have I created a strategy? Have I documented that strategy? Have I executed on a plan of building tools, tactics, and resources? And am I holding myself accountable in such a way that I can influence the people who have discretion to let me out, if that's what I'm defining success as?
So that's actually something we discussed on the call, because in one of the hundreds of videos that we've given away, for free, somewhere we mentioned that without the right record, there's a chance the probation officer may demand that you work in a job with a skill set that may be below your skill set. And he said, I've been an accountant for a long time. I don't immediately have to return to work, and all work is honorable, but I don't necessarily want to go to a job that my probation officer is going to make me have. Is there any way that I can influence that process now while I'm in prison? And there are many ways, and perhaps you can touch on that for a little bit.
I can, but our fee is $400 an hour for that type of work. No.
Well, that's a good point, because the call started with.
Let's just tell the story about many people that are working with us. I mean, our colleague Sam, phenomenal guy, degree from Wharton, CEO in the insurance space. Got out of prison using all of our strategies and tools, had a 60-month sentence, got out in 22 months. That makes Sam a superstar. Not only did he do that, but because he created the tools, tactics, and resources, while he's on home confinement, he's making $10,000 plus a month working with our team. Contrast that with the other people he is meeting every day or every week when he's in these TDEP meetings that are put into that position that you just described, where they're working at the equivalent of a coffee shop or bagging groceries. And if you go to the grocery store and you see that 48-year-old, 62-year-old man bagging groceries, it's a good chance he's serving some time in a halfway house, because that's not the normal trajectory for people in their middle ages to be taking a $14, $13 an hour job. But that's what the system positions people for. So if you don't want that outcome, you better take that same strategy of preparing a mitigation tool. And the sooner you start to prepare, the better off you are going to be. And we've got a massive amount of resources on our site. They could always reach out to you. They could reach out to Sam. They could figure out a way to plant the seeds today. We'll close this interview out by asking that famous question. When's the best time to plant an oak tree?
I think you have said 20 years ago. When's the second best day?
Today.
That's right.
Today. But tell me something. When you're planting that seed to an oak tree, is that enough? You just plant the seed? What else do you have to do?
You got to water it. You got to nurture it. You got to watch after it.
What do you nurture it with?
What do you nurture it with?
Fertilizer.
Fertilizer. I was not going to say that on air.
Well, that's okay. What's fertilizer made of?
I'm not going to say it. My kids may watch this someday.
Spell it. What's it spell? What's fertilizer?
I'm not doing it.
Okay, where does it come from?
Does it come from cows?
Yeah, cows, and it comes from the back end of a cow, right?
I'm not saying my kids are going to watch it someday.
Kids
No
know that a
swearing.
cow puts out livestock manure.
Feces,
It's a nice
we'll say.
way.
Feces.
We call it manure, right?
Manure.
But we know what manure is, right?
we do.
So the seed starts off underground,
Yeah.
right? And then you got to put manure on the top.
Yeah.
So the seed has to grow through a lot of manure. It's
growing.
Is that right?
It's growing.
Through what?
A lot of manure.
Manure. And so the seed, in order for it to be able to grow an oak tree, it's got to grow through the manure. And so does Jim, right? Jim's got to grow through the manure. He's got to plant his seed, but he's got to understand, I got to go through a lot of manure. And that is how you grow an oak tree. That's how you overcome the indignity of imprisonment. And certainly the first step is to give us a call. Do you know our phone number?
I know all of our phone numbers.
Because I don't know the number they call Sam, but I know that Sam will call back.
I should know. I don't. We have many. We're going to put it up at the bottom
We'll put
of
it
this
on the
video so
screen.
you can call Sam. Yes.
We'll call Sam because Sam is the best guy to talk to about getting through the manure. He did it, and he's come back strong, and we know you're going to come back strong too. Justin, thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
coming over to my house and allow us to film this video. We got a tremendous amount of content coming in. We've got a pretty exciting guest that we're going to be talking about on our show who's really done well in mitigation, and he's helping us. But thanks so much. We hope that we can help.
Thank you very much.